Touch briefly now about something that I've got really mixed feelings because it sounds like a good idea. The idea that a corrupt police officer hotline is rolled out nationally. Now, they've had one of these in the Met Police in London, and the idea is that we have a hotline to call in the event of what is regarded as police corruption. I'm kind of not sure whether this is just something that's going to make everyone feel a lot better, but in practice could cause quite a lot of problems and won't necessarily solve the root problem that there are a lot of officers, according to the Met Police officer, who are unfit for purpose. So let's navigate that one. I'm very pleased to say Shabnam Chowdhury is joining me, former Detective Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good afternoon, Nick.
This hotline, I was completely unaware that the Met Police had a hotline. Apparently it's launched 752 investigations on the back of it, or close to that, 728. What we don't hear about is, does that mean we've lost 728 police officers whilst they are investigated, or were there 728 corrupt, utterly unsuitable police officers or not? I've got mixed feelings about this hotline. Can you convince me one way or the other?
Well, I don't think it's something that can convince anybody, because this is very much a very small chunk of the bigger problem. But what would happen, I think they've had something like 3,000 calls to that particular hotline, which is an independent hotline run by Crimestoppers. And as a result of that, something like 700 officers, or 700, one of the numbers you've just given, have been are subject to investigation. Some of those officers will be restricted. Some of those, which means that they'll be given desk jobs, which means it reduces the capability and the resources on the front line. Some of those officers will be suspended, and some of those officers will remain in post doing whatever job it is that they are doing until that investigation is concluded, in which case some will either be charged, will sit on a misconduct panel, be sacked, or those that think that they are going to be found guilty will jump ship and that they will resign, but they may still be subjected to that misconduct meeting in any case. Go on, sorry.
So, no, well, first of all, let's look at it from one angle. If I just ring up because a police officer has annoyed me or gave me a parking ticket or I felt unjust, how are they going to weed out vexatious claims?
Well, they will get vexatious claims, just as they do when they had the internal right line in the Metropolitan Police, for example, where there were vexatious complaints made, particularly against the vast majority that came in, where a third of them were against black and minority officers. And then they were investigated and they were either put to bed, nipped in the bud, or some of those were subjected to investigation. They will get vexatious complaints because there will be public members, people in the public that are not happy with the way that they've been treated. But this is about victims, complainants who are reporting corrupt police officers who are domestic abusers, who are potentially paedophiles, who are committing fraud, who are committing all sorts of crimes. And you've seen in the last year in particular, the Met Police have given out a rollout of a significant number of officers who are either being charged, convicted, or subject to going through the judicial process, because not necessarily of this right line. The thing that we need to understand is those 700 and so many officers, what are the actual outcomes? Have they?
Will we know? Will we ever know?
Well, I think it would be very helpful if the Met, as they are doing this, a rollout, they need to say, well, of those 720, we've already sacked this many, and this many are still subject to investigation. They haven't really given you a deep dive into that actual process and how it's worked and how successful it's been. But I would say this, I do think it's a good move, but it's not the most important move, because there are lots of other issues that need to be addressed within policing in order for trust and confidence to be built.
Well, on that note, I'm slightly more sceptical about the hotline, but on that note, what do you think are the important moves that have to be taken to if you like, deal with this level of utterly inadequate police members serving in the police force?
Well, the biggest issue they've got within policing is actually changing the culture. And that means, and I'm not talking about the culture as in just around some of the diversity issues or some of the race, misogynistic issues. This is about police officers who have had the courage to actually speak out, to nip it in the bud. So when there are officers that are behaving in a way that is unacceptable, unprofessional, then those officers can be challenged, and those red flags can be identified at an earlier stage, and they'll either be investigated, issues can be dealt with and addressed very quickly, or they can go and be sacked or subject to discipline, whichever it is. And the problem that policing has had, there's been such a culture within policing that certain behaviours have become the norm. Let's not forget why this has actually been initiated, and this is because of the murder of Sarah Everard, and then after that followed David Carrick, who was convicted of a significant number of rapes, 49 offences as I recall. And these are the officers that just walked around in policing, displaying certain behaviours that just went unchallenged and actually were fouled by the leadership because they didn't actually deal with it.
And would you say, final question on this, would you say it is actually, how wide, let me ask you, how widespread do you think this culture is, and how widespread does it affect the police force?
Well, it's widespread across every single 43 forces that we've got across the UK. Just look at Nottinghamshire Constabulary, who've just been put into special measures. Look at the murders of Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar. The families are now asking for a review because of the way the police investigated those matters. So a lot of police forces have got a lot of catching up to do, and they need to actually own up to the issues that they've got within policing. And until they deal with the culture internally, they're not going to get it right externally.